Nero Wolfe and the Disappearances. It was a Friday in October when the thing started, which suited me fine, because Fridays meant Fritz would be making his boeuf bourguignon, and if I had to deal with trouble, I preferred doing it on a full stomach. I was at my desk in the office, typing up the final report on the Hendricks embezzlement case, a tedious affair that had paid well but offered no excitement beyond watching a CPA sweat through 3 shirts when the doorbell rang. Fritz was elbow deep in pastry dough, so I went to answer it myself. Through the one-way glass panel, I could see a woman on the stoop, maybe 45, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my car and holding herself with the kind of rigid control that suggested she was either royalty or about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The 5 Dobermans were already alert in the front hall. Caesar standing at attention with Mars flanking him, both sets of eyes fixed on the door. Apollo paced near the stairs while Minerva sat perfectly still, watching, calculating. Diana, the smallest, had her nose pressed to the gap under the door, quivering. "Easy," I told them. I opened the door to the length of the chain. "Yes?" "I need to see Nero Wolfe." Her voice was Boston Brahmin filtered through Manhattan finishing schools. "My name is Constance Hollenbeck. My husband has disappeared." I'd heard that line before, usually followed by a story about a man who decided to spend his autumn years with a blonde half his age in Havana, but something in her eyes stopped my usual wisecrack. "Disappeared how?" "Vanished. Without a trace. The police say there's nothing they can do." "The police say a lot of things, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Most of them are true." I unlatched the chain. "Come in." Caesar growled low as she stepped inside, not threatening but establishing parameters. She froze. "They won't hurt you if you don't make sudden moves," I said. "They're part of Mr. Wolfe's security arrangements. We've had some trouble in the past." I led her to the office and seated her in the red leather chair. The bulletproof windows, installed after the incident with the bomb last spring, filtered the afternoon sun into something softer, almost peaceful. It was 20 minutes before 11, which meant Wolfe was still upstairs in the plant rooms with his orchids. I had time to get the preliminaries. "Tell me about your husband," I said, settling behind my desk with my notebook. She smoothed her skirt, a gesture that seemed automatic. "Theodore Hollenbeck, 62 years old. He left our Park Avenue apartment last Monday morning to go to his office. He's senior partner at Hollenbeck, Marsh & Tyrone, investment banking, and never arrived. His secretary called me at 10:30. By noon I'd contacted everyone I could think of. By evening the police were involved. Any reason he might have wanted to disappear?" "None." She said it flatly, meeting my eyes. "We've been married 28 years. Our finances are solid. He has no mistress, I'd know. He was planning a trip to London in 2 weeks. He had theatre tickets for Wednesday night. The police checked airports, train stations, bus terminals. His passport is still in his desk drawer. His car is still in the garage. Theodore didn't leave, Mr. Goodwin. He was taken." "Taken by whom?" "I don't know, but he's not the only one." That made me sit up straighter. "Go on." She opened her purse slowly, mindful of Caesar's eyes tracking her movement, and extracted a folded newspaper clipping. I took it and spread it on the desk. It was from last week's Times, a small item buried on page 17. "Prominent physician missing. Police baffled." "Dr. Eleanor Ashford," Mrs. Hollenbeck said. "She vanished from her office at Mount Sinai on October 2nd. Walked out between appointments, never came back. Then 3 days later, a real estate developer named Julian Casterbridge disappeared from the Century Club in broad daylight. Wednesday, a woman named Lydia Drummond, she runs an art gallery in Chelsea, vanished from her own opening reception. 30 people in the room, and nobody saw her leave." "And you think these are connected to your husband?" "I know they are. Look at the dates." She leaned forward. "Every 3 days, like clockwork. Eleanor Ashford on the 2nd, Julian Casterbridge on the 5th, Lydia Drummond on the 8th, Theodore on the 11th. It's a pattern, Mr. Goodwin, and if I'm right, someone else will disappear today." I checked the calendar. October 14th, 3 days since Theodore Hollenbeck had vanished. The skin on the back of my neck did that thing it does when a case stops being routine. "Have you told the police about this pattern?" I tried. They said I was seeing connections that weren't there, that people disappear in New York every day. Her voice went hard. "They're wrong. I've done research. All 4 of them. The doctor, the developer, the gallery owner, my husband. They're all connected to a charitable foundation called the Meridian Society. Theodore was on the board. So were the others. What does the Meridian Society do? I don't know. Theodore never discussed it much. Something about cultural preservation and educational grants. But that's where they all knew each other, Mr. Goodwin. And now they're all gone. The elevator in the hall made its rattling descent. 11 o'clock. Wolfe would be entering the office any moment, expecting his morning beer and his morning mail, and absolutely no interruption of his morning routine. I stood. Mrs. Hollenbeck, I should warn you, Mr. Wolfe doesn't like missing persons cases. He thinks they're police work. He's going to try to say no. Then I'll have to convince him otherwise, won't I? She had spine. I liked that. The door opened, and Nero Wolfe entered, a seventh of a ton of genius in a yellow shirt and brown suit, moving with the careful dignity of a man who considered unnecessary motion a waste of calories. Caesar and Mars immediately went to him, flanking his progress to his desk like an honor guard. He settled into his reinforced chair behind the desk, noted Mrs. Hollenbeck's presence with a slight narrowing of his eyes, and looked at me. Archie? Mrs. Constance Hollenbeck, I said. Her husband vanished on Monday. She thinks it's connected to 3 other disappearances. The police are useless, Mrs. Hollenbeck cut in. Wolfe's eyebrows rose a millimeter at being interrupted. I came to you because I need someone who can think. My husband is part of a pattern. 4 people gone in 12 days, all connected to the same organization, all taken in broad daylight with no witnesses. And unless I'm very wrong, someone else will disappear today. Wolfe pushed his center desk drawer open 2 inches, then closed it, his version of a sigh. Madam, disappearances are the province of the police. They have resources I lack. I suggest they have resources they won't use. I've given them everything, the pattern, the connection to the Meridian Society, and they've done nothing. Meanwhile, my husband is somewhere, possibly hurt, possibly worse, and time is running out. I can pay you $50,000 to find him. That got a flicker of interest. Wolfe's orchid expenses were running high this season. Please, she added, and her voice cracked just slightly. I know you prefer to sit in this office and have the world come to you, but the world is taking people, Mr. Wolfe, taking them and erasing them, and I think Theodore is still alive. I think they all are. I can feel it, but not for much longer. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his eyes half closed. Finally, Archie, Fritz has prepared liver pâté for lunch. Mrs. Hollenbeck will join us. After lunch, you will visit the address of the Meridian Society and learn what you can about their operations. You will also speak with the families of the other missing persons. We will reconvene at 6 o'clock. I grinned. He'd said yes. Sort of. Mrs. Hollenbeck stood, relief washing over her face. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, madam. I haven't found your husband. I've merely agreed to look for him. The distinction is important. She left after lunch with a promise to send over her husband's papers. I watched her go, then turned to Wolfe, who was examining a bottle of Remmer's beer with the concentration of a jeweler appraising diamonds. You think she's right about the pattern? I asked. I think, Wolfe said, pouring carefully, that 4 people connected to the same organization vanishing on a 3-day schedule is either an extraordinary coincidence or an extraordinary crime. I dislike coincidences. Therefore, Archie, we must assume a crime. And if it is a crime, someone will pay for interrupting my autumn tranquility. And if someone else disappears today, Wolfe's eyes met mine. Then we will know Mrs. Hollenbeck is not only bereaved but also correct. And that, Archie, would make this case considerably more interesting than the Hendricks embezzlement. He was right about that. As it turned out, he was right about a lot of things, but not everything. Not the important thing. The Meridian Society kept offices in a limestone building on Madison Avenue, the kind of place where the brass fixtures gleamed and the elevator operator wore white gloves. I gave my name to a receptionist who looked like she'd been hired for her ability to intimidate, and waited in a room decorated with abstract paintings that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. After 15 minutes, a man emerged from the inner sanctum. He was tall, mid-50s, with silver hair swept back and the kind of tan that came from weekends in the Hamptons. His suit was Savile Row. Mr. Goodwin, I'm Maximilian Cordell, Executive Director of the Meridian Society. I understand you're inquiring about Theodore Hollenbeck, and Eleanor Ashford, Julian Casterbridge, and Lydia Drummond, I said. All members, all missing. His expression shifted to practiced concern. A terrible situation. The board is of course deeply worried. We've cooperated fully with the police. I'm sure you have. What exactly does the Meridian Society do, Mr. Cordell? We're a philanthropic organization dedicated to preserving cultural heritage and supporting educational initiatives. We fund archaeological expeditions, museum exhibitions, scholarship programs. Our members are distinguished individuals who believe in giving back. How distinguished do you have to be to join? We're selective. Net worth of $5 million minimum. Demonstrated commitment to the arts and humanities. A willingness to serve on committees and attend our quarterly galas. He smiled thinly. We're not a country club, Mr. Goodwin. We're serious about our mission. What about enemies? Anyone who'd want to hurt your members? None that I'm aware of. We occasionally receive angry letters from archaeological sites that object to Western institutions funding excavations, but nothing that rises to the level of threats. I'll need a list of all your members. I'm afraid that's confidential. 4 of them are missing. Confidentiality seems less important than finding them, wouldn't you say? He considered this, then nodded. I'll have my assistant prepare something. It may take a day or 2. Make it today. I'll send someone to pick it up at 5. I left him looking unhappy, which suited me fine. Diana had insisted on coming along. She'd been restless all morning, and I took her for a walk through Central Park to think. The Doberman moved like liquid shadow beside me, alert to every sound and movement. The bulletproof windows and reinforced locks made the brownstone secure, but the city was something else. Out here, Diana was my early warning system. My next stop was Mount Sinai, where Dr. Eleanor Ashford had vanished. Her office manager was a precise woman named Mrs. Kelleher, who kept checking the clock as if the doctor might walk through the door any moment. She had 3 appointments that morning, Mrs. Kelleher said, saw 2 of them without incident. Then, between the 2nd and 3rd, she stepped out, said she needed to make a phone call. That was 11:40. By 12:15, when she hadn't returned, I went looking for her. Her coat and purse were still in her office. Her car was still in the parking garage. She simply evaporated. Did she seem worried about anything? Distracted? No more than usual. Dr. Ashford was always focused. She didn't make small talk or waste time. She was professional to the point of coldness, frankly. What kind of medicine did she practice? Neurology. She specialized in memory disorders and cognitive decline. Very cutting-edge research. She was working on a paper about memory retrieval techniques when she disappeared. Something pinged in the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. I thanked Mrs. Kelleher and moved on to the Century Club, where Julian Casterbridge had last been seen. The club manager, a fussy man named Pemberton, showed me to the reading room where Casterbridge had been sitting when he vanished. He was alone, Pemberton said, reading the Wall Street Journal in that chair by the window. I saw him myself at 2:30. By 3 o'clock, when his lunch guest arrived, he was gone. The newspaper was still folded on the side table. His reading glasses were on top of it. But Mr. Casterbridge, nowhere to be found. Did anyone see him leave? Not a soul, and we have staff at every entrance. Impossible to leave without being noticed. Unless someone didn't want to be noticed, I said. Back at the brownstone by 5, I found Saul Panzer waiting in the office. Saul was the best freelance operative in New York. A small man with a big brain who could tail a shadow and make it look easy. Wolfe had clearly called him in while I was out. Saul picked up the Meridian Society membership list. Wolfe said from behind his desk. Mars and Minerva lay at his feet, watchful. 68 members in total. I've been studying it while you were gallivanting about the city. I don't gallivant, I investigate. What did you find? Patterns within patterns. The 4 missing individuals all served on the same subcommittee, the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. They were responsible for approving funding for archaeological expeditions and artifact purchases. In the last year, they've approved expenditures totaling $7 million. That's a lot of old pottery. Indeed, more interesting is what they rejected. 3 months ago, the committee turned down a request from a Professor Nikolai Vassiliev to fund an expedition to Siberia. He wanted $2 million to excavate what he claimed was a Bronze Age burial site. And they said no? They said his research was speculative and his credentials questionable. Professor Vassiliev, it seems, has a reputation for dramatic claims that don't pan out. The committee's rejection was unanimous. I whistled. So we've got a spurned academic with a grudge against the 4 missing people? Possibly. Or we have a coincidence. Archie, I need you to find Professor Vasiliev and determine his whereabouts on the relevant dates. Saul will visit the families of Julian Casterbridge and Lydia Drummond. Fritz is preparing duck for dinner. We reconvene at 9. What about the 5th disappearance? Mrs. Hollenbeck said. Someone would vanish today. Wolfe's expression darkened. The day is not yet over. Professor Nikolai Vasiliev lived in a cramped apartment near Columbia University, surrounded by books, maps, and the kind of chaos that suggested either genius or madness. He answered the door in a moth-eaten cardigan, blinking at me through thick glasses. Mr. Goodwin, you called about the Meridian Society? That's right. Can I come in? He ushered me into a living room that smelled of tobacco and old paper. Apollo, who'd come with me this time, sniffed suspiciously at a stack of archaeological journals, but settled near my feet. I assume this is about the missing committee members, Vasiliev said, lighting a cigarette. I heard about it. Terrible business. You applied to them for funding 3 months ago. They rejected you. They rejected science, he corrected, heat in his voice. My research is groundbreaking. I've identified a burial site that could rewrite our understanding of Bronze Age migration patterns. But because I don't play their little political games, because I don't bow and scrape to their precious committee, they dismissed me out of hand. That must have made you angry. Of course it made me angry. $2 million is nothing to them. They spend that on cocktail parties and galas, but they wouldn't spare it for actual scholarship. He stubbed out the cigarette. But if you're implying I had something to do with their disappearances, you're wasting your time. I was in Montreal giving a lecture when the doctor vanished, in Toronto when Casterbridge disappeared, and in my classroom when Lydia Drummond went missing. I can provide witnesses for all of it. What about last Monday? Office hours, 11 to 3. 20 students can confirm it. I believed him. He was too genuinely aggrieved to be acting. Do you know anyone else who might have a grudge against the committee? Half of academia, probably. They're not exactly beloved, but enough to kidnap them. He shook his head. That's madness. I left him to his maps and headed back downtown. It was 6:15 when I reached the brownstone, dusk settling over the city like a shroud. Fritz met me at the door, his face troubled. Archie, Inspector Kramer is in the office with Mr. Wolfe. There's been another disappearance. My stomach dropped. Who? A man named Gregory Bannister, member of the Meridian Society's Cultural Acquisitions Committee. He vanished from his law office at 4 o'clock this afternoon, exactly 3 days after Theodore Hollenbeck. The pattern held. Someone else had been taken, right on schedule. I found Kramer in his usual position, the red leather chair, smoking a cigar, looking like he wanted to arrest someone, but couldn't figure out who. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his fingers interlaced over his middle mound, the picture of Buddha contemplating infinity. Caesar stood at attention by Wolfe's chair, eyeing Kramer with the kind of suspicion reserved for uninvited guests. Goodwin, Kramer grunted, your employer's been giving me the runaround for 20 minutes. Maybe you can translate. I doubt it. Mr. Wolfe's runarounds are usually deliberate. 5 people have vanished in 2 weeks, Kramer said, ignoring my crack. All high society types, all connected to this Meridian Society outfit. No bodies, no ransom demands, no witnesses. It's like they're being plucked off the street by ghosts. You working this case? Mrs. Hollenbeck hired us this morning, I said. What do you know about Gregory Bannister? 60-year-old attorney, partner at Bannister and Flynn. He was in his office with a client at 4 o'clock, discussing a will. Client stepped out to use the restroom. When he came back 3 minutes later, Bannister was gone. Door was still locked from the inside. Window was closed. Security cameras show nobody entering or leaving. That's impossible, I said. Yeah, well, impossible seems to be happening a lot lately. Kramer turned back to Wolfe. I want to know what you know. All of it. 5 missing persons makes this a serial case, and I don't have time for your games. Wolfe opened his eyes. Inspector, I know precisely what you know. That 5 individuals connected to the same organization have disappeared on a predictable schedule. I know that Professor Vasiliev has alibis for the relevant times. I know that the missing persons were all members of the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Beyond that, I know nothing definitive. However, I have suspicions. Share them. Not yet. They're unformed, and I dislike voicing unformed thoughts. Give me until Monday. If another person vanishes, then I'll have confirmation of my theory. Monday's 3 days away. Someone could die. Someone could die in the next hour, Inspector. But I cannot prevent what I don't understand. 3 more days of investigation may save all 5 lives. Hasty action may cost them. Kramer stood, his face flushed. You're playing with people's lives. I'm attempting to preserve them. There's a difference. After Kramer stormed out, I sat down across from Wolfe. You want to share these suspicions with me? Not yet. They're too nebulous. But Archie, I need you to do something tomorrow that you won't enjoy. What's that? Attend the Meridian Society's emergency board meeting. Mrs. Hollenbeck, as Theodore Hollenbeck's wife, has been invited. I've asked her to bring you as her companion. You'll observe, you'll listen, and most importantly, you'll note who seems most frightened. Why would any of them be frightened? They're not on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Aren't they? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. That, Archie, is one of the things we need to discover. The Meridian Society's emergency meeting convened Saturday afternoon at the Knickerbocker Club, in a wood-paneled room that reeked of old money and older privilege. Mrs. Hollenbeck arrived in a black dress, looking like she hadn't slept. Diana came with us, staying close to Mrs. Hollenbeck's side. The dog had bonded with her during yesterday's lunch, sensing her distress. 23 board members showed up, including Maximilian Cordell, who called the meeting to order with the grim efficiency of a funeral director. I sat in the back, watching faces while he ran through the facts. 5 disappearances, police involvement, media interest starting to build. Our priority, Cordell said, is supporting the families and cooperating with law enforcement. But we must also protect the society's reputation. We cannot allow this tragedy to tarnish our mission. A woman in her 60s raised her hand. With all due respect, Maximilian, 5 of our members are missing. I'm less concerned about reputation than about whether I'll be next. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. No one else is at risk, Cordell said firmly. The disappearances have targeted members of a specific committee. How do you know that? A man interrupted. He was 40-ish, with the build of a college athlete gone to seed. How do you know this stops with the Cultural Acquisitions Committee? Maybe it spreads to the Finance Committee next, or the Development Committee. Hell, maybe it hits the full board. More murmurs, louder this time. Diana's ears pricked up, sensing the tension. Cordell held up his hands. Please, let's not panic. The police have assured me. The police haven't assured anyone of anything, Mrs. Hollenbeck said, standing. Every eye turned to her. The police have done nothing. My husband has been missing for 5 days. Dr. Ashford, Mr. Casterbridge, Ms. Drummond, Mr. Bannister, all gone. And the only pattern anyone's identified is the one I found. Not the police, not this board, me. Mrs. Hollenbeck, Cordell began. No. You need to hear this. Someone is taking our members, taking them in broad daylight, from secure locations, without leaving a trace. That's not random. That's planned. That's organized. And that means someone knows how to make people vanish, which means any of us could be next. Silence. Then a woman in the front row stood. She was younger than most of the others, maybe early 40s, dressed in a burgundy suit. Her face was pale but composed. Mrs. Hollenbeck is right. We need to face facts. 5 committee members gone. We should be asking why. What did they know? What were they working on? Because if this is about the Cultural Acquisitions Committee, then it's about something they approved or rejected. And you are? I asked from the back. She turned. Adrienne Voss. I'm on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Or I was. I tendered my resignation yesterday. Why? I asked. Because I don't want to disappear, Mr. Goodwin. Because whatever's happening, it's connected to that committee, and I want no part of it. Cordell's jaw tightened. Miss Voss, that's an irresponsible... Is it? Then tell me why every single missing person served on that committee. Tell me why they all vanished on the same 3-day schedule. Tell me why Gregory Bannister's office was locked from the inside when he disappeared. Tell me anything that makes sense, Maximilian. Because right now, the only thing that makes sense is that someone's hunting us. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. People shouting questions, demanding answers, threatening to quit the society entirely. I watched Cordell try to restore order and fail. I watched Adrienne Voss gather her things and leave. I watched faces, some frightened, some angry, some calculatingly blank. And I watched one man in particular, sitting in the corner, saying nothing. He was older than most, maybe 70, with white hair and a face like weathered stone. While everyone else argued, he sat perfectly still, staring at his hands. After the meeting broke up, I approached him. "Excuse me, you didn't say much." He looked up. His eyes were grey and cold. "I'm Arthur Pembroke. I didn't say anything because there's nothing useful to say. They're gone. They're not coming back." "You sound certain of that." "I'm a realist, Mr. Goodwin. 5 people don't vanish without a trace, unless someone very skilled is making it happen, and people that skilled don't usually leave survivors." "Were you on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee?" "I was. I rotated off last year. Lucky timing, I suppose." "What kind of work did the committee do?" "Vetted grant applications, approved purchases, occasionally traveled to evaluate potential acquisitions. Tedious work, mostly. Made enemies, sometimes, when we rejected applications, but nothing that would warrant this." "What about Gregory Bannister? Did you know him?" Something flickered across Pembroke's face. "Yes, we were friends, good friends. He was meticulous, careful. If he disappeared, it's because someone overpowered him or tricked him. Gregory didn't make mistakes." I thanked him and found Mrs. Hollenbeck waiting by the door. Diana pressed against her leg. "Well?" she asked. "Well, I think half the society is ready to resign. Cordell is losing control, and Adrienne Voss knows something she's not saying." "Do you think she's next?" "I don't know. But Wolfe will want to talk to her. Let's go home." We made it back to the brownstone by 4. I gave Wolfe my report while he listened with his eyes closed, Fritz's duck warming on the serving cart. When I finished, he opened one eye. "Adrienne Voss resigned from the committee yesterday." "That's what she said." "Then she's frightened. People don't resign from prestigious committees without cause. Archie, I want you to bring her here tomorrow. Tell her we can protect her. Tell her I need to know what the Cultural Acquisitions Committee was working on before its members started vanishing. Tell her anything necessary, but get her here. And if she refuses?" "She won't. Fear is an excellent motivator. Now let us eat. Duck waits for no man, and I've had quite enough of disappearances for one day." We ate. The duck was perfect, and I tried not to think about what would happen in 3 days, when the pattern suggested someone else would vanish. Someone who might be in this room right now. Sunday morning, I tracked Adrienne Voss to her apartment in Gramercy Park, a well-appointed 3rd-floor walk-up with good light and better security. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, looking younger and more tired than she had at the meeting. "Mr. Goodwin, I wondered when you'd show up." "I'm predictable that way. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Her living room was filled with books and art. Real art, not the kind bought for investment. A cat watched me from the windowsill, with suspicious yellow eyes. I'd left the Dobermans at home, no sense in spooking her more than necessary. "Nice place," I said. "Thank you. You didn't come here to admire my decorating. What does Nero Wolfe want?" "Information. You resigned from the Cultural Acquisitions Committee because you're scared. That means you know something. I know that 5 people are missing, and I don't want to be the 6th. That's all." "That's not all. You stood up at that meeting and specifically mentioned what the committee approved or rejected. What did you reject, Ms. Voss? What got someone angry enough to start making people disappear?" She sat down on her couch, pulling her knees up. The cat jumped down and wound itself around her ankles. "We rejected a lot of things. That's what the committee does. 90% of applications get turned down. But one of them mattered. One of them made someone dangerous." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, there was a collection. About 4 months ago, a private collector in Vienna, a man named Klaus Reinhardt, approached us about purchasing his acquisitions. Pre-Columbian artifacts, mostly. Olmec, Maya, some Aztec pieces. He wanted $8 million for the lot. And we turned him down. The provenance was questionable. Several pieces looked like they might have been looted, possibly smuggled out of Mexico illegally. We're careful about that sort of thing. International law, repatriation issues, ethics. So we said no. How did Reinhardt react? Badly. He sent angry letters, threatened legal action. Claimed we'd ruined him financially, but that was 3 months ago. The letters stopped. I assumed he'd moved on. Did anyone follow up? Not that I know of. We document rejections and file them away. That's standard procedure. I leaned forward. Miss Voss, I need you to come to Mr. Wolfe's office tomorrow and tell him everything you just told me. He's working this case and he needs all the information he can get. I don't know anything else. Maybe you do and don't realize it. Wolfe's good at finding connections, but he can't do it without talking to you directly. She considered this, fear and calculation warring on her face. If I come to his office, will I be safe? Safer than anywhere else in New York. The brownstone has bulletproof windows, reinforced locks, and 5 Dobermans. Nobody gets in unless Wolfe wants them in. 5 Dobermans. Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Minerva, and Diana. They're good at their jobs. She almost smiled. All right, tomorrow. What time? 11 o'clock, after Mr. Wolfe comes down from his orchids. I left her there with her cat and her books and her fear, and headed back to report to Wolfe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Reinhardt rejection was 4 months old. Why would someone wait that long to start taking revenge? And how did it connect to the others? Vasiliev's Siberian expedition, whatever other rejections the committee had handed out. Back at the brownstone, I found Saul Panzer waiting with news. He'd been digging into Klaus Reinhardt while I was out. Your Viennese collector is dead, Saul said without preamble. Died 6 weeks ago. Heart attack in his apartment. The artifacts were sold at auction to pay his debts. No heirs, no lawsuits pending, no revenge possible. Wolfe grunted. Then the Reinhardt matter is irrelevant. What else? I've been looking at the other committee rejections from the past year. 16 applications turned down. Most were straightforward. Bad research, insufficient credentials, questionable ethics. But 3 stood out. The first was Vasiliev's Siberian expedition, which we already know about. The second was a request from an American antiquities dealer named Hammond Graves to fund an expedition to recover artifacts from a shipwreck off the coast of North Carolina. Confederate gold, supposedly. The committee called it treasure hunting, dressed up as archaeology, and rejected it. And the third? I asked. The third was weird. A woman named Beatrice Caldwell applied for funding to preserve ancient manuscripts in a monastery in Romania. The committee rejected her because her credentials couldn't be verified. Turns out Beatrice Caldwell doesn't exist. The address she listed was fake. The references were fake. The whole application was fabricated. Wolfe's eyes opened. Someone used a false identity to apply for funding. Looks like it. The committee flagged it as fraudulent and handed the matter to their lawyers. Nothing came of it. When was this? 8 months ago. Before the other rejections. Right. Wolfe was silent, his fingers drumming on the desk. Caesar, lying by his feet, raised his head and watched his master's face. Archie, Wolfe said finally, tomorrow you will speak with Hammond Graves. Determine his whereabouts on the relevant dates. Saul, I want you to investigate this Beatrice Caldwell application. Find out who submitted it, how they submitted it, and why someone would create a false identity to apply for funding they surely knew they wouldn't receive. This smells of reconnaissance. Reconnaissance for what? I asked. For this? For learning how the committee operates, who sits on it, how decisions are made. If someone planned to target the committee, they would first need to understand it. He paused. Fritz is preparing veal piccata for dinner. We reconvene at 6. As Saul left, I turned to Wolfe. You think someone studied the committee for 8 months before starting to make people disappear? I think, Wolfe said heavily, that whoever is behind this is patient, methodical, and very, very dangerous, which means, Archie, that Miss Voss is correct to be frightened, and that we must work quickly, because in 3 days someone else will vanish. Unless we stop them first. Yes, unless we stop them first. Hammond Graves operated out of a cluttered office near the South Street seaport, surrounded by nautical charts and salvage equipment catalogues. He was a big man, probably 50, with a drinker's nose and a salesman's smile. When I walked in Monday morning with Minerva at my side, she'd insisted on coming, pushing her nose against the door until I relented. His smile faltered. That's a hell of a dog.
She's friendly unless you're not?
I said. I'm Archie Goodwin. I want to talk about your application to the Meridian Society. The smile disappeared entirely. That was a year ago. Ancient history. 5 members of the committee that rejected you have disappeared in the last 2 weeks. That makes it current events. His face went pale. Now wait just a goddamn minute. I had nothing to do with that. Nothing. Then you won't mind telling me where you were on October 2nd, 5th, 8th, 11th and 14th. I was right here, working. I've been here every day for the past month trying to drum up investors for a new project. You can ask my secretary. She's been here the whole time. I will. What did you think of the committee's rejection? He slumped in his chair. I thought they were short-sighted bastards who wouldn't know a legitimate historical recovery operation if it bit them on the arse. That shipwreck has millions in Confederate gold and silver, plus artifacts of genuine historical value. But they called me a treasure hunter and dismissed me out of hand. Were you angry enough to do something about it? I was angry enough to get drunk and write a strongly worded letter that my secretary wouldn't let me send. That's it. I didn't kidnap anyone, for Christ's sake. I just wanted funding. Minerva sniffed around his desk, then sat down and looked at me. Her version of giving the all clear. I questioned his secretary, who confirmed his alibi for all 5 dates, and left. Back at the brownstone by 11, I found Adrienne Voss already in the office, perched nervously on the edge of the red leather chair. Apollo and Diana flanked her like honor guards, sensing her anxiety. Wolfe was behind his desk, a bottle of beer already open. Miss Voss has been explaining the committee's procedures, Wolfe said as I entered. Archie, Hammond Graves? Clean, solid alibi for all 5 disappearances. He's angry but not homicidal. As expected. Miss Voss, please continue. She took a breath. I was explaining that the committee meets monthly to review applications. We get about 15 to 20 each month. We evaluate based on academic merit, ethical considerations, financial viability, and potential impact. Most rejections are straightforward. Weak research, questionable provenance, insufficient credentials. But some rejections provoke stronger reactions, Wolfe said. Yes, some applicants become persistent. Vasiliev sent us letters for weeks after we rejected him. Reinhardt threatened lawsuits. Graves showed up at our office twice demanding reconsideration. But none of them seemed dangerous, just frustrated. What about the Beatrice Caldwell application, the fabricated one? That was strange. It came in with all the proper paperwork, application forms, project proposal, budget breakdown, letters of reference. Everything looked legitimate at first glance, but when we started checking references, nothing panned out. The monastery she claimed to be working with had never heard of her. The university she said she'd graduated from had no record of her. The whole thing was a phantom. Did you report it to the police? Our lawyers advised against it. They said it was probably someone testing our systems, maybe planning a more sophisticated fraud later. We flagged the application in our database and moved on. Wolfe interlaced his fingers. Miss Voss, I need you to think carefully. In the 8 months since that application, did anything unusual happen with the committee? Any breaches of security? Any information leaks? Any members mentioning they were being followed or felt threatened? She frowned, thinking. Not that wait, yes. About 6 months ago, Theodore Hollenbeck mentioned that someone had broken into his car. Nothing was stolen, but his papers were disturbed. He had committee materials in his briefcase, meeting minutes, application summaries. He thought it was just a random theft attempt. But now it looks like reconnaissance, I finished. Precisely, Wolfe said. Someone was gathering information about the committee, learning who the members were, what they worked on, how they made decisions. And then, 2 weeks ago, they began taking them. But why? Adrian asked. If this is revenge for a rejection, why not just kill them? Why make them disappear? And how? How does someone make 5 people vanish from secure locations without witnesses? Those, Wolfe said, are excellent questions. Archie, has Saul reported in? Not yet. As if on cue, the phone rang. I answered it. Saul's voice came through, tight with urgency. Archie, I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe. Now. I put him on speaker. You're on, Saul. I've been digging into the Beatrice Caldwell application, tracked down how it was submitted by mail from a Manhattan post office. Got the postal clerk to remember the package. It was dropped off by a woman matching no description. Medium height, medium build, brown hair, glasses. Forgettable. Deliberately forgettable, Wolfe murmured. Right. But here's the interesting part. The return address on the package was fake, but the handwriting on the envelope matched another piece of mail received by the Meridian Society 6 months later. A letter requesting information about committee membership procedures. That letter was signed by someone named Margaret Chen, and it had a real return address, an apartment in Washington Heights. And, I prompted, and Margaret Chen doesn't exist either. But the apartment does, and I tracked down the landlord. The apartment was rented 8 months ago to a woman paying cash. She left 5 months ago without notice. The landlord kept her security deposit and was happy to let me look around. What did you find? Wolfe asked. A workspace, maps of Manhattan, with locations marked, the Meridian Society office, Theodore Hollenbeck's apartment, Dr. Ashford's hospital, the Century Club, all of it. Photographs of the committee members, schedules, and something else. Plans for a delivery van, detailed plans, like someone was modifying it for a specific purpose. The room went very quiet. Even the Doberman seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. A van, Wolfe said slowly. Designed for what purpose? I'm not sure, but there were notes about soundproofing, ventilation systems, and restraints. Mr. Wolfe, I think someone built a mobile prison. Adrienne Voss made a small sound. I moved to the phone. Saul, you need to get that evidence to Kramer. Now. Already on my way to the precinct. But Archie, there's one more thing. The maps had dates written on them. The dates of the disappearances. All 5 of them, marked in advance. Which means whoever's doing this planned every one of them, I said. And it means, Wolfe added grimly, that they planned today's disappearance as well. Archie, what time is it? I checked my watch. 11:40. The first 4 disappearances occurred between 11 and 4 o'clock. If the pattern holds, someone will vanish within the next 4 hours. He looked at Adrienne Voss. Miss Voss, you will remain here until the danger has passed. Fritz will prepare lunch. Archie will contact Inspector Kramer and inform him of Saul's findings. And I will sit here and think, because I am missing something vital. What are you missing? I asked. The why. I understand the how. A prepared vehicle, careful surveillance, precise timing. I understand the who, someone with resources, patience, and a vendetta against the committee. But I don't understand the why. Revenge for a rejection should be immediate, emotional. This is calculated, methodical. This is someone with a plan that extends beyond simple vengeance. Maybe they're selling them, Adrienne said quietly. Human trafficking. Wealthy victims who can be ransomed or sold. Then why no ransom demands? Why no communication at all? Wolfe shook his head. No, Miss Voss, this is something else, something I haven't yet grasped. The phone rang again. I grabbed it. Goodwin. It was Kramer, and he sounded like he'd been chewing nails. Your friend Panzer just dropped a bombshell on my desk. I've got every available officer looking for this van, but Manhattan's got 10,000 delivery vans, and we're looking for one modified by someone who knows what they're doing. You got anything else for me? We've got Adrienne Voss here. She's on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. We're keeping her safe. Smart. Keep her there. I'm sending a patrol car to the brownstone as backup. And Goodwin. If Wolfe knows something he's not telling me, now would be a good time to share. I looked at Wolfe. He waved a hand in dismissal. He's still thinking, Inspector. You'll be the first to know when he stops. He better think fast. We've got 4 hours until someone else disappears. He hung up. I turned to Wolfe. He's right. We need answers. I know. Archie, bring me the file on the Beatrice Caldwell application. Every document, every page. And tell Fritz we'll take lunch in here. I don't want to move from this desk until I understand what we're facing. I fetched the file while Fritz brought in sandwiches and coffee. Wolfe spread the papers across his desk, studying each one with the concentration of a surgeon. The Dobermans settled around the room, creating a protective perimeter. Caesar at the door, Mars by Wolfe's chair, Apollo near the window, Minerva by the file cabinets, Diana at Adrian's feet. We waited. 1 o'clock came and went, then 2. Wolfe read and reread documents, occasionally grunting or tapping a finger on his desk. Adrienne sat rigid, barely touching her food. I divided my time between watching the street through the bulletproof windows and watching Wolfe work. At 2:30, the phone rang. Kramer again. No disappearance yet. Maybe the pattern's broken. Maybe they know we're onto them. Or maybe, I said, they're waiting until the last possible moment. 3 o'clock, 3:15, 3:30. At 3:45, Wolfe suddenly sat up straight. Archie, the monastery. What about it? The Romanian monastery from the Beatrice Caldwell application. What was its name? I rummaged through the papers. Monastery of the Transfiguration. Why? Because I've been a fool. Ms. Voss, the Caldwell application claimed the monastery held ancient manuscripts in need of preservation, correct? Yes. Medieval religious texts, mostly. And the committee rejected the application because Beatrice Caldwell didn't exist. But did anyone verify whether the monastery needed help? Adrian blinked. Which means the monastery might be real. The need might be real. Only the applicant was false. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Archie, I need you to contact the Romanian embassy, immediately. Find out if the Monastery of the Transfiguration exists, and if so, whether anyone has recently contacted them about manuscript preservation. I was already dialing. It took 10 minutes and 3 transfers, but I finally reached someone at the embassy who could help. Another 15 minutes of broken English and careful explanation, and I had my answer. The monastery exists, I reported, and yes, someone contacted them 6 months ago about preserving their manuscripts. A Dr. Simon Lattimore from New York. He offered to fund the entire preservation project, $500,000. The monastery accepted. Lattimore visited 3 months ago and removed several manuscripts for restoration. He was supposed to return them by now, but he hasn't. Dr. Simon Lattimore, Wolfe said. Does the Meridian Society have a member by that name? Adrienne shook her head. No. I'd remember. But the Cultural Acquisitions Committee would have funded such a project if approached properly, correct? Absolutely. Medieval manuscripts are exactly the kind of thing we support. Then why didn't Dr. Lattimore approach the committee? Why did someone else, someone using a false identity, apply instead? Because, I said slowly, Lattimore didn't want the committee involved. He wanted the manuscripts for himself. But why make committee members disappear? Adrienne asked. If he already has the manuscripts, what does he need with us? That, Wolfe said, is what we must discover. Archie, find out everything you can about Dr. Simon Lattimore. Saul can help. I want his address, his background, his connections to the Meridian Society, and I want it before 4 o'clock. I looked at my watch. 3:58. That's 2 minutes, Mr. Wolfe. Then move quickly. I moved quickly, but not quickly enough. At 4:02, Kramer called back. We've got number 6. Arthur Pembroke. Disappeared from his apartment 20 minutes ago. His doorman saw him come in at 3:40. When his daughter arrived at 4 to check on him, he was gone. Door still locked from the inside. No sign of struggle. I met Wolfe's eyes. Pembroke. He was at the society meeting on Saturday. Said he used to be on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Which makes him a target, Wolfe said. Archie, did Pembroke say anything else? I thought back. He said he and Gregory Bannister were friends, close friends, and that Bannister was meticulous and careful. As is Pembroke himself, I imagine. These are not careless men, Archie. They don't simply vanish because someone rings their doorbell, which means whoever is taking them has their trust, or has a way to bypass trust entirely. Indeed. Wolfe turned to Adrienne. Miss Voss, did Arthur Pembroke have any particular expertise on the committee? Medieval history. He was our go-to person for anything involving manuscripts, religious artifacts, that sort of thing. He's published extensively on Byzantine iconography and Eastern European monasteries. Then he would have been interested in the Monastery of the Transfiguration. Fascinated. If someone had approached him privately about those manuscripts, he'd have wanted to see them. Wolfe nodded slowly. Archie, call Saul. I need everything on Simon Lattimore within the hour. And call Kramer back. Tell him to check Arthur Pembroke's recent communications, phone records, emails, letters. I want to know if Lattimore contacted him. I made the calls. Saul was already tracking down Lattimore's information. Kramer agreed to check Pembroke's communications, but pointed out that it would take time we might not have. The patterns accelerated, Kramer said. 3 days between disappearances. Now 6 people gone. If this keeps up, it won't, I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. We're close. You better be. Fritz served dinner at 7 brook trout with almonds, but none of us had much appetite. Adrienne stayed in the office, too frightened to leave the brownstone's protection. The Dobermans rotated watch duties, 2 always alert while the others rested. Outside, dusk settled into night, and the city lights made patterns against the bulletproof glass. At 8:15, Saul arrived with a folder thick with information. He'd been thorough. Dr. Simon Lattimore, age 53, British expatriate, living in New York for the past 15 years, specializes in medieval manuscripts and religious artifacts, teaches at NYU, published 2 books on manuscript preservation, well respected in academic circles, no criminal record, no outstanding debts, no obvious red flags. Address? Wolfe asked. Upper West Side. Nice apartment. Nothing extravagant. I drove by. Lights were on. No sign of anything unusual. Family? Divorced. No children. Parents deceased. 1 sister in London. Minimal contact. How does he fund his work? That's where it gets interesting. His salary from NYU is modest, but he's received several substantial private grants over the past 5 years. The grant applications list him as an independent researcher working on manuscript preservation projects in Eastern Europe. From whom did he receive these grants? Various foundations, all legitimate, total funding over 5 years, approximately $2 million. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. $2 million to study manuscripts? To preserve them, according to his applications, he travels extensively. Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, spends months at monasteries and libraries, documenting manuscripts and arranging for restoration work. And the Monastery of the Transfiguration? His most recent project. He approached them 6 months ago, offered funding, and removed 5 manuscripts for restoration in New York. The manuscripts are reportedly worth over $1 million, illuminated medieval texts from the 13th century. Where are they now? Unknown. He hasn't returned them to the monastery. They've been calling him, but he keeps making excuses about the restoration taking longer than expected. Wolfe was silent, thinking. Then, Archie, did Kramer find anything in Pembroke's communications? I'll check. I called the inspector. He picked up on the first ring. Yeah, we found something. Pembroke received a letter 3 days ago from Dr. Simon Lattimore, hand-delivered, according to Pembroke's doorman. The letter invited Pembroke to view the manuscripts from the Romanian monastery, said they were in Lattimore's apartment, and that he'd value Pembroke's expert opinion before returning them. When was Pembroke supposed to visit? Today at 4 o'clock. The pieces clicked together. Lattimore lured him there. Looks like it. We sent officers to Lattimore's apartment. He's gone. Neighbor says he left around 3:30 with a large suitcase. What about the manuscripts? No sign of them. But we found something else. Rental receipts for a storage facility in Queens. Big space. Paid 6 months in advance. Cash. We're getting a warrant. Inspector, we'll meet you there. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Storage facility in Queens. Kramer's getting a warrant. Then we go to Queens. Saul, you'll drive. Archie, bring Caesar and Mars. Ms. Voss stays here with Fritz and the other 3 dogs. Fritz, I'm trusting you with her safety. Fritz, standing in the doorway with a worried expression, nodded. With my life, sir. We moved fast. Wolfe detested leaving the brownstone. I could count on one hand the number of times he'd ventured out for a case, but 6 missing persons and a fleeing suspect constituted an emergency. Caesar and Mars loaded into Saul's car like furry commandos, alert and ready. The storage facility was a sprawling complex of orange metal units off Queens Boulevard, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Kramer was waiting with a dozen officers and a bolt cutter. Unit 244, he said as we approached. Registered to S. Lattimore. Let's see what we've got. He cut the lock and rolled up the door. Inside was a nightmare. The space had been converted into a makeshift laboratory, or prison. Hospital beds lined one wall, each equipped with restraints and IV stands. Medical equipment hummed. Monitors, oxygen tanks, a portable X-ray machine. Along the opposite wall stood filing cabinets, a desk covered with papers, and a large whiteboard filled with notes and diagrams. But no people, no missing committee members, No Dr. Lattimore. Sweet Jesus, Kramer breathed. Wolfe moved to the desk, Caesar at his side. He examined the papers with quick efficiency while officers spread out, documenting everything. Medical charts, Wolfe said. One for each missing person. Blood types, allergies, medical histories. He's been treating them. For what? I asked. Memory suppression. He held up a pharmaceutical bottle. Scopolamine, combined with benzodiazepines and other sedatives. He's been keeping them unconscious or semi-conscious. Why? Kramer demanded. What's the point? Wolfe moved to the whiteboard. His face went very still. Inspector, come look at this. We crowded around. The board was covered with diagrams of the human brain, notes about neural pathways and memory formation, and a timeline showing each disappearance with notes beneath. Subject 1, Dr. Eleanor Ashford, neurologist, expertise, memory disorders and retrieval techniques. Subject 2, Julian Casterbridge, real estate developer, art collector, known to possess photographic memory. Subject 3, Lydia Drummond, gallery owner, synesthesia documented, enhanced visual memory. Subject 4, Theodore Hollenbeck, investment banker, noted for exceptional recall of financial data. Subject 5, Gregory Bannister, attorney, famous for memorizing entire case histories. Subject 6, Arthur Pembroke, medieval historian, expert in manuscript analysis and textual memory. Below the notes was a single word in capital letters, extraction. He's taking their memories, I said slowly. No, Wolfe corrected. He's studying them, learning from them. These people all have exceptional memory capabilities, either naturally or through professional training. Dr. Lattimore isn't trying to ransom them or kill them. He's using them as research subjects. For what? Kramer asked. Wolfe pointed to another section of the board. For this. It was a diagram labeled Manuscript Decryption Protocol. Below it were photographs of medieval manuscripts, beautiful illuminated pages covered with Latin text and elaborate decorations. The manuscripts from Romania, Wolfe said. They're not just historical artifacts. They contain something Lattimore desperately wants to decode, something encrypted or hidden within the text, and he needs experts in memory, pattern recognition and textual analysis to help him unlock it. But they're unconscious, I said. How can they help if they're sedated? They're not always sedated. Look, Wolfe pointed to the timeline. Sessions scheduled daily, 2 hours per subject. Memory tests, pattern recognition exercises, textual analysis tasks. He's waking them up, extracting their expertise, then sedating them again. The bastard's using them like human computers, Kramer said. Precisely. And when he's finished with one, he moves to the next. Dr. Ashford gave him her knowledge of memory and neural pathways. Casterbridge provided his photographic recall. Drummond offered her synesthetic perception. Hollenbeck contributed his pattern recognition skills. Bannister added his analytical capabilities. And now Pembroke, the manuscript expert, will help him decode whatever secret these documents contain. But where are they now? I demanded. This place is empty. Wolfe turned to the filing cabinets and pulled open a drawer. Inside were more papers, more charts, and a shipping manifest. He moved them, Wolfe said quietly. Today, between 3 and 6 o'clock. Hired a medical transport service. Professional, legitimate, no questions asked. And according to this manifest, they went to... He paused, reading, LaGuardia Airport, private cargo terminal, scheduled departure for London at 9 o'clock tonight. I checked my watch. 8:40. We can still catch them, Kramer said, already moving. I'll call airport security. Inspector. Wolfe's voice stopped him. You'll need this. He held up a photograph from the files, a professional headshot of a middle-aged man with thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a pleasant, forgettable face. Dr. Simon Lattimore, the man who made people disappear. Saul drove like a man possessed, while Kramer coordinated with airport security over the phone. Wolfe sat in the front passenger seat, a tight squeeze with Caesar's head on his knee. Mars and I occupied the back, both of us ready to move fast when we arrived. Security's locking down the private terminal, Kramer reported. No departures until we clear them. They're looking for Lattimore now. He won't be obvious, Wolfe said. A man who can make 6 people vanish without witnesses knows how to avoid detection. We hit LaGuardia at 8:55. Kramer's badge got us through security and onto the tarmac where 3 small planes sat ready for departure. Officers swarmed the area while emergency vehicles blocked the taxiways. The medical transport was legitimate, a security officer told Kramer. Manifest says they're transporting 6 critical care patients to a hospital in London for specialized treatment. Documentation's perfect. Medical records, international clearances, everything. Which plane? Kramer demanded. The Gulfstream on the left. But we can't find the doctor. Pilot says he stepped away 15 minutes ago to check something at the terminal and hasn't come back. He's running, I said. Then we find him. Kramer dispatched officers to search the terminal while we approached the Gulfstream. Inside, the cabin had been converted into a mobile ICU. 6 beds, 6 unconscious patients hooked to monitors and IVs. I recognized Theodore Hollenbeck from the photographs. Older, thinner, but alive. The others lay motionless, lost in chemically induced sleep. Are they all right? Wolfe asked the medical attendant, a nervous young woman in scrubs. Stable. Dr. Lattimore said they were being transported for treatment of a rare neurological condition. He had all the paperwork. Where did he go? He said he forgot something in his car. That was 20 minutes ago. Wolfe turned to Kramer, checked the parking areas. He's either running or retrieving something essential, probably the manuscripts. We split up. Kramer took half the officers to the parking structures. I took Caesar and Mars toward the long-term lot, moving fast. The Dobermans were in hunt mode now, noses working, bodies tense. We found Lattimore's car in the far corner of the lot, a nondescript Honda loaded with luggage. The trunk was open. Lattimore himself was 30 feet away, running toward the terminal with a leather satchel clutched to his chest. "Stop!" I shouted. "Police!" He ran faster. Caesar and Mars needed no command. They shot forward like black missiles. Lattimore made it another 20 feet before Caesar caught him, hitting him at the waist and taking him down hard. Mars arrived a second later, teeth bared, making it clear that running further would be a bad idea. I reached them as Lattimore lay gasping on the pavement. The satchel spilled open beside him. Medieval manuscripts slid across the concrete, illuminated pages glowing in the parking lot lights. "Don't touch them," Lattimore wheezed. "They're priceless." "So are the 6 people you kidnapped," I said, pulling him to his feet. "Dr. Simon Lattimore, you're under arrest." Kramer arrived with his officers, and they took Lattimore into custody. I carefully gathered the manuscripts, 5 of them, exactly as Saul had reported, and handed them to an evidence technician. "What's so special about these?" I asked Lattimore. "What's worth kidnapping 6 people?" He smiled, still catching his breath. "You wouldn't understand. None of you would. Those manuscripts contain secrets, alchemical formulas, codes, knowledge lost for centuries. I've spent 15 years searching for them. 15 years, and I was so close to decoding them. So close to understanding what the medieval monks discovered about memory and consciousness, and you drugged innocent people to help you." I cut in. "That's not research, that's psychopathy. They're alive, aren't they? I kept them safe, kept them healthy. I just needed their expertise for a few weeks. Then I would have returned them, and no one would have remembered anything. The scopolamine ensured that." "You're delusional. I'm a genius. History will prove that when the manuscripts reveal their secrets." Kramer read him his rights while I walked back to the Gulfstream. Paramedics were preparing to transport the victims to a real hospital. Wolfe stood near the plane, watching the operation with satisfaction. "All 6 alive," he said as I approached. "Sedated but unharmed. Mrs. Hollenbeck will have her husband back within days. And Lattimore? Will spend the rest of his life in prison, I should think. Kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, administering drugs without consent. The charges will be substantial. What about the manuscripts?" "They'll be returned to Romania. Whatever secrets they contain, if any, will remain sealed until legitimate scholars can study them properly." We watched as the last of the victims was loaded into an ambulance. Theodore Hollenbeck stirred slightly as they moved him, his eyes flickering open for just a moment before closing again. He'd be confused when he woke fully, possibly frightened, but he'd be alive. They all would. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "how did you figure it out? The manuscripts, I mean." What made you connect them to the disappearances? The pattern of expertise. Each victim possessed a specific skill related to analyzing complex information. Dr. Ashford understood memory. Casterbridge could retain vast amounts of visual data. Drummond saw patterns across sensory modalities. Hollenbeck recognized financial patterns. Bannister synthesized legal precedents. And Pembroke knew medieval manuscripts intimately. Separately, they're merely talented individuals. Together they form a cognitive engine capable of decoding information that any single person might miss. So Lattimore assembled a team without their consent. And without their consciousness. He needed their abilities but not their cooperation. A monstrous calculus. We drove back to Manhattan in silence. By the time we reached the brownstone, it was nearly midnight. Adrienne Voss was still in the office, kept company by Fritz and the remaining 3 Dobermans. When we told her everyone had been found alive, she cried. "Thank you," she said to Wolfe. "Thank God you figured it out in time." "Thank your fear," Wolfe replied. "If you hadn't resigned from the committee and come to us, we might have lost valuable days. Fear, when channeled properly, can be quite useful." After she left, Kramer stopped by to take our statements and collect the manuscripts for evidence. He looked exhausted but satisfied. 6 kidnapping victims recovered alive, he said. "That's a good night's work. Hell of a lot better than finding bodies." "Indeed," Wolfe agreed, "though I wish we'd found them sooner. Those people suffered considerably. But they're alive. That's what matters." Kramer headed for the door, then paused. "Wolfe, thanks. I know I give you grief, but thanks." After he left, Wolfe settled behind his desk with a sigh. All 5 Dobermans arranged themselves around the room, their duty done. Fritz brought beer and sandwiches, and for a while we just sat in comfortable silence. "Archie," Wolfe said eventually, "Mrs. Hollenbeck's check should clear within days. $50,000 for 2 days' work. Not bad." "Not bad at all, though I could have done without the airport chase. The brownstone felt empty without you. I don't like leaving home." "I noticed. You barely fit in Saul's car." "An indignity I don't care to repeat." He drank his beer thoughtfully. "But necessary. Sometimes one must venture into the world's chaos to preserve order. Deep thoughts at midnight. Shallow thoughts would be a waste of good beer." He looked at me. "Go to bed, Archie. Tomorrow you can type up the case notes and perhaps call Mrs. Hollenbeck with the good news." "You don't want to tell her yourself?" "I want to sleep. The case is closed. The vanished have reappeared. Justice, such as it is, will be served. That's sufficient for one evening." I went upstairs, Diana following at my heels. From my window I could see the city lights, millions of them, stretching to every horizon. Somewhere out there 6 people were waking up in hospitals, confused and frightened but alive. Somewhere out there a delusional academic sat in a cell, mourning his interrupted research more than his victim's suffering. And here, in the brownstone on West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe sat behind his desk, drinking beer and probably thinking about his orchids, secure in his fortress with his dogs and his routine intact. The world was chaos. But in this one building, at this one moment, order prevailed. I went to sleep satisfied. Part 9. The morning after. I woke Saturday morning to find Fritz already in the kitchen preparing breakfast, humming something that might have been Mozart or might have been a French folk tune. With Fritz it was hard to tell. Diana was curled up at the foot of my bed, but the moment I stirred she was on her feet, ready for the day. "Coffee's ready," Fritz called as I came downstairs. "And Mr. Wolfe says you should call Mrs. Hollenbeck at 9 o'clock. No earlier, he doesn't want her woken if she's finally sleeping." Thoughtful of him. He can be, when it suits him. I took my coffee to the office and found the morning papers already spread on my desk. The Times had the story on page 1, 6 missing society members found alive, professor arrested in bizarre kidnapping plot. The Herald Tribune went with, manuscript obsession leads to mass abduction. Both articles mentioned that the victims had been recovered through the efforts of the police, with assistance from private investigator Nero Wolfe. Wolfe would hate that. He preferred to work in shadows, not headlines. At 9 sharp, I called Mrs. Hollenbeck. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Goodwin, I've been at the hospital all night. They let me see Theodore for a few minutes. He was confused, disoriented, but he knew me. He knew me, Mr. Goodwin. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. That's good news, Mrs. Hollenbeck. The best kind. I don't know how to thank you. Thank Mr. Wolfe. You found him when no one else could. You brought him back to me. Mr. Wolfe will send you a bill, which will be thanks enough. But I'm glad your husband is safe. The check is already in the mail. $50,000, as promised. And Mr. Goodwin, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. I owe you both a debt I can never repay. After I hung up, I sat for a moment thinking about debt and payment, and what constitutes fair exchange. $50,000 for 2 days of work seemed generous, until you considered what was at stake. 6 lives, 6 families spared the agony of permanent loss. How do you calculate the value of that? Wolfe entered at 11, descending from his morning session with the orchids. All 5 Dobermans were with him, forming their usual protective phalanx. Caesar and Mars flanked him directly. Apollo ranged ahead, Minerva followed at his right shoulder, and Diana brought up the rear. They moved like a well-drilled military unit. "Good morning, Archie. Mrs. Hollenbeck." Grateful, her husband's recovering, the check's in the mail. Satisfactory. He settled behind his desk and rang for Fritz to bring beer. What does the morning bring beyond gratitude and checks? Headlines. We're in both papers. They're calling Lattimore a madman obsessed with medieval secrets. He's not mad, merely amoral. There's a difference. Not much of one when you're kidnapping people. True. He opened his first bottle of Remmers and poured carefully. Has Saul reported in? Not yet. You want him for something? No. I merely wondered if he'd collected the hazard pay I owe him for last night's adventure. Chasing criminals through airports is not his usual work. He seemed to enjoy it. Saul enjoys anything that pays well and doesn't involve getting shot. A reasonable philosophy. The doorbell rang. Through the one-way panel, I could see Inspector Kramer on the stoop, looking considerably more rested than he had at midnight. I let him in, Caesar growling his usual greeting. "Morning, Goodwin. Wolfe in?" Where else would he be? I led him to the office. Wolfe regarded him with the expression of a man who'd been hoping for an uninterrupted morning and had just been disappointed. "Inspector, I trust the victims are recovering? All 6 are stable. Doctors say the drugs will clear their systems within a few days. They'll have gaps in their memory, probably won't remember anything from the time they were taken, but no permanent damage." Kramer took the red leather chair without being invited. "I came to fill you in on Lattimore. We've been interrogating him all night." And the son of a bitch is proud of himself. Keeps talking about his research, his discoveries, how history will vindicate him. He actually believes he was justified in kidnapping those people because the manuscripts are too important for conventional methods. What did he learn from them? I asked. The manuscripts, I mean. Did he actually decode anything? Hard to say. He claims he was close to a breakthrough, that the manuscripts contain alchemical formulas related to memory enhancement and consciousness expansion. Medieval monks supposedly discovered techniques for improving cognitive function, and Lattimore wanted to recreate them. Alchemy is pseudoscience, Wolfe said flatly. Yeah, well, Lattimore doesn't think so. He spent 15 years tracking down references to these manuscripts in medieval texts, then another year locating them at that Romanian monastery. He convinced the monks to let him preserve them, paid them $500,000, then brought them back to New York to study. And when he couldn't decode them alone, he decided to conscript help, I said. Right. He'd been planning it for months. The fake Beatrice Caldwell application was his test run. He wanted to see how the Meridian Society's vetting process worked. Then he started surveillance on committee members, learning their routines, identifying their expertise. He rented the storage facility, bought medical equipment, studied sedatives and memory-suppressing drugs. The whole thing was meticulously planned. How did he actually take them? Wolfe asked. 6 people don't simply vanish from secure locations. He posed as a medical courier, had a legitimate uniform, fake credentials, the works. He'd approach victims in semi-private settings, hospital corridors, office buildings, club hallways, claim there was a medical emergency requiring their expertise, and get them to follow him. Once isolated, he'd inject them with a fast-acting sedative. 30 seconds later, they'd collapse. He'd load them into his van, the modified delivery vehicle Saul found evidence of, and drive them to the storage unit. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes per victim. And nobody saw this? I asked. He was careful, chose moments when his victims were alone, or nearly alone, moved fast. The van looked professional, clean, marked with fake medical company logos. If anyone saw him loading an unconscious person, they'd assume it was a legitimate medical transport. Diabolical, Wolfe murmured, but effective. Too effective. If you hadn't connected the manuscripts to the disappearances, we might never have found them. Lattimore was planning to fly the victims to a private clinic in Scotland. After he finished with them, wiped their memories completely, and returned them to New York with manufactured stories about brief amnesias. They'd never have known what happened to them. What about the manuscripts? I asked. What happens to them now? Evidence for the trial. After that, they'll be returned to Romania. The monks are understandably upset. They trusted Lattimore, and he betrayed that trust. They're talking about never loaning artifacts again. A shame, Wolfe said. Legitimate scholarship suffers when criminal obsession taints the field. Kramer stood, preparing to leave. Anyway, I wanted to thank you properly, in daylight. Without exhaustion making me stupid, you solved this case, Wolfe. The department would still be looking for a conventional kidnapper if you hadn't seen the pattern. Mrs. Hollenbeck saw the pattern. I merely understood it. Take the compliment, for Christ's sake. You earned it. Kramer headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Wolfe, the press is going to want to talk to you. They're calling it the case of the vanishing socialites. Very dramatic, very headline-friendly. I don't speak to the press. I know, that's why I'm sending them all to Goodwin. He grinned at my expression. Enjoy your fame, Goodwin. You've earned that too. After he left, I turned to Wolfe. I'm not talking to reporters. Of course you are. You enjoy it. The attention, the clever responses, the opportunity to shape the narrative. Don't pretend otherwise. I do not enjoy it. Archie, you were born to perform. The press gives you an audience. Embrace it. I'll embrace them out the door. As you wish. But do try to make us sound competent. Mrs. Hollenbeck's check is generous, but reputation brings future clients, and future clients bring future checks. The phone rang. I answered it, expecting a reporter. Instead, I got Saul. Archie, tell Mr. Wolfe I finished the background check he requested on the Meridian Society board members. Nothing unusual. All clean, all respectable, all boring. The excitement was entirely on the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Thanks, Saul. Send your bill. Already did, with hazard pay included. I relayed the message to Wolfe, who nodded approval. Saul understands the value of thoroughness, a rare quality. The rest of Saturday passed quietly. Fritz made coq au vin for lunch. I fielded calls from 3 reporters, all of whom I politely declined. Wolfe spent the afternoon in the office reading a book on Ottoman architecture, his current obsession, while the Dobermans lounged around him in various states of relaxation. At 4 o'clock, Adrienne Voss called. Mr. Goodwin, I wanted to thank you again, and to tell you that I'm rejoining the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. I was scared, but, well, running away doesn't solve anything. The committee does good work, important work. I won't let one madman ruin that. Good for you, Miss Voss. The committee's lucky to have you. And I'm lucky to have survived. If I hadn't come to Mr. Wolfe when I did, I might have been number 7. She was right. If she'd stayed on the committee without seeking help, Lattimore might have targeted her next. Fear had saved her life. After I hung up, I told Wolfe about the call. He nodded thoughtfully. Courage, Archie, is not the absence of fear. It's the choice to act despite fear. Miss Voss demonstrated both fear and courage. An admirable combination. You getting philosophical in your old age? I'm reflecting. There's a difference. This case troubled me more than most. Why? Because it revealed how easily people can be erased. 6 individuals, intelligent, accomplished, connected, vanished without a trace. If Mrs. Hollenbeck hadn't noticed the pattern, if she hadn't had the resources to hire us, those 6 people would have disappeared into Lattimore's obsession and never returned. How many others vanish each year without anyone noticing the pattern? How many are taken by people with plans and resources and no conscience? Cheerful thoughts. Necessary thoughts. We live in a world where people can be made to disappear, Archie. The brownstone's bulletproof windows and Dobermans protect us, but most people have no such protection. They're vulnerable. Lattimore understood that and exploited it. And now he's in jail. For how long? His lawyers will argue diminished capacity, obsession bordering on insanity. He may serve 15 years, 20 if we're lucky. And then, he'll be free again, still obsessed with his manuscripts and his formulas, still willing to use people as tools. You think he'll do it again? I think obsession doesn't fade with incarceration, but that's a problem for the future. For now, 6 people are safe, and we've earned our fee. That's sufficient. He returned to his book. I returned to my typing. The Doberman slept. Fritz hummed in the kitchen. The brownstone settled into its evening routine, secure and orderly. Outside, the city hummed with chaos and danger and 10 million stories. But inside, in this fortress on West 35th Street, peace prevailed. For now, Part 10, the aoration seder, the watch svidbam, kosterv, to futha pastulf. Part 10. Sunday brought rain, a cold, steady downpour that turned the city grey and sent pedestrians scurrying for cover. I spent the morning typing up case notes and dodging phone calls from reporters who'd gotten our number from God knows where. Wolfe spent it in the plant rooms with Theodore Horstman, his orchid nurse discussing some crisis involving Phalaenopsis humidity levels. At noon, Mrs. Hollenbeck called again. Mr. Goodwin, Theodore is asking to meet Mr. Wolfe. He wants to thank him personally. Would tomorrow be possible? I checked with Wolfe when he came down at 11. He frowned. I dislike emotional displays. He's not going to cry on you, he just wants to say thank you. Must he? Mr. Wolfe, the man was kidnapped, drugged, and used as a human research tool for 5 days. If he wants to shake your hand and express gratitude, you can endure it. Very well, 2 o'clock tomorrow. But only Mr. Hollenbeck. I won't have my office turned into a reunion. I called Mrs. Hollenbeck back with the invitation. She sounded relieved. Monday morning brought clear skies and dropping temperatures. Autumn asserting itself after a warm October. The newspapers had moved on to other stories, though the Times ran a follow-up piece about Lattimore's arraignment. He'd pleaded not guilty, naturally. His lawyer was already building an insanity defense. Theodore Hollenbeck arrived promptly at 2, looking thinner than his photographs, but healthier than I'd expected. His wife accompanied him, though she stayed in the front room with Fritz while I led Hollenbeck to the office. Wolfe rose from his desk, a courtesy he extended to few people, and shook Hollenbeck's hand. The Dobermans watched carefully, Caesar moving to intercept if needed, but Hollenbeck showed no threat. He simply stood there, looking at Wolfe with the expression of a man facing his salvation. Mr. Wolfe, I don't remember much of what happened to me. The doctors say that's normal. The drugs Lattimore used cause retrograde amnesia. But I remember waking up in that plane, confused and terrified, and learning that you'd found us, that you'd figured out what was happening when no one else could. I owe you my life, sir. I wanted to say that in person. Wolfe settled back into his chair, uncomfortable with the emotion but managing it. Mr. Hollenbeck, you owe me $50,000, which your wife has already paid. The debt is satisfied. As for your life, you owe that to your wife's intelligence and persistence. She saw the pattern. She came to me. She refused to accept the police department's dismissal. Your gratitude belongs to her. I've thanked Constance many times, but I wanted to thank you as well. Hollenbeck took the red leather chair. Can you tell me what happened? The police gave me the basics, but I want to understand. I want to know why I lost 5 days of my life. Wolfe interlaced his fingers over his stomach. Very well. You were targeted by Dr. Simon Lattimore because you served on the Meridian Society's Cultural Acquisitions Committee. Dr. Lattimore had acquired 5 medieval manuscripts from a Romanian monastery, manuscripts he believed contained encoded alchemical formulas related to memory and cognitive enhancement. He couldn't decode them alone, so he assembled a team of experts by force. A team? You, Dr. Ashford, Mr. Casterbridge, Ms. Drummond, Mr. Bannister, and Mr. Pembroke. Each possessed specific cognitive abilities that Lattimore needed. Dr. Ashford understood memory formation. Mr. Casterbridge had photographic recall. Ms. Drummond possessed synesthetic perception. You contributed pattern recognition. Mr. Bannister offered analytical synthesis, and Mr. Pembroke provided expertise in medieval manuscripts. He drugged us and forced us to help him? Yes. He kept you sedated, except during daily 2-hour sessions where he would wake you, present you with portions of the manuscripts, and extract your expertise through carefully designed tests and exercises. Then he would sedate you again. You have no memory of these sessions because the drugs he used prevent memory formation. Hollenbeck's face had gone pale. That's monstrous. Indeed, Dr. Lattimore is brilliant but amoral. He saw you not as people but as tools, useful instruments to be employed for his research. The fact that you were human beings with families, lives and rights was irrelevant to him. Did he decode anything? Did his methods work? Unknown. The manuscripts are now evidence in a criminal trial. Whatever secrets they contain, if any, will remain sealed until legitimate scholars can study them properly. Dr. Lattimore's research has been confiscated. Hollenbeck sat in silence for a moment, processing this. Then, the Cultural Acquisitions Committee rejected his funding application, didn't we? This is revenge. No, Wolfe said firmly. Dr. Lattimore never applied for funding. He acquired the manuscripts independently, using money from other sources. Your committee rejected the fraudulent Beatrice Caldwell application, but that was merely Lattimore's reconnaissance, his way of learning who served on the committee and what expertise each member possessed. You were targeted not for what you rejected, but for what you know. So this could happen again, to other committees, other experts. It could, but it won't, because Dr. Lattimore is in custody and will remain there for the foreseeable future. And because you and your fellow committee members now understand the risks, you'll be more careful, more vigilant. The fortress of complacency has been breached. You won't rebuild it the same way. Hollenbeck nodded slowly. I suppose that's something. A terrible education, but an education nonetheless. He stood. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, for finding us, for understanding what no one else understood, and for taking the time to explain it to me. After he left, I sat down across from Wolfe. That was almost kind of you. He deserved the truth. Too often, victims are left in ignorance, piecing together fragments from police reports and news stories. I prefer clarity. Even when the truth is monstrous? Especially then. Ignorance doesn't protect anyone, Archie. It merely postpones understanding. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Kramer, looking official and carrying a folder. Got the final report on Lattimore, he said, dropping into the red leather chair still warm from Hollenbeck. Thought you'd want to see it. Wolfe took the folder and read, while I looked over his shoulder. The report was thorough. Lattimore's background, his planning process, the equipment he'd purchased, the drugs he'd used, his motivations, everything documented and explained. The DA thinks he's got a solid case, Kramer said. Multiple counts of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon. The sedatives count as weapons. Lattimore's looking at 40 years minimum. What about the manuscripts? Wolfe asked. Being returned to Romania next week. The monks want them back, and frankly nobody here wants to keep them. They're evidence of a crime now. Tainted. A shame. Legitimate scholars might have learned something valuable from them. Yeah, well, legitimate scholars don't kidnap people. That's sort of the dividing line between science and insanity. Kramer stood. Anyway, I wanted you to have the full report, for your files. I don't keep files. Then for Goodwin's files. Whatever. Just wanted to close the loop. He headed for the door, then turned back. You know, Wolfe, sometimes I forget how good you are at this. Then a case like this comes along and reminds me. You saw things nobody else saw, made connections nobody else made, saved 6 lives in the process. I sat in my office and thought, hardly heroic. Thinking is underrated. Keep doing it. After Kramer left, Wolfe picked up his book on Ottoman architecture and continued reading. I watched him for a moment, this enormous genius who claimed to dislike emotional displays, but had taken the time to explain everything to Theodore Hollenbeck, who said he preferred his office to the world, but had driven to Queens and LaGuardia when 6 lives hung in the balance. Something on your mind, Archie? Just thinking about what Kramer said, about you being good at this. I'm adequate, nothing more. You saved 6 people. I recovered 6 people. Mrs. Hollenbeck saved them by noticing the pattern and having the sense to hire me. The distinction is important. If you say so, I do say so. Now, unless you have further philosophical observations, I'd like to finish this chapter. The Topkapi Palace's architectural evolution is quite fascinating. I left him to his reading and went to the kitchen, where Fritz was preparing dinner. Veal chops with morels, if my nose was right. Diana followed me, her tail wagging lazily, "Is Mr. Wolfe satisfied?" Fritz asked. "As satisfied as he ever is. The case is closed, the client is happy, the check cleared. That's his definition of satisfaction." "And you, are you satisfied?" I thought about it. 6 people safe, a madman caught, justice served, more or less. The brownstone secure, Wolfe content, the Dobermans vigilant. "Yeah," I said, "I'm satisfied." "Good. Then you can help me with these potatoes. I need them peeled and sliced thin." I peeled potatoes, while Diana watched hopefully for scraps. Outside, the afternoon faded toward evening. The city moved and breathed and lived, full of danger and chaos and 10 million stories still untold. But inside the brownstone, in this fortress on West 35th Street, order prevailed. The vanished had been found. The missing had been returned. And Nero Wolfe, genius detective, sat in his office, reading about Ottoman architecture and drinking beer, secure in the knowledge that he'd done his job well. For now, that was enough. Epilogue, beer, orchids and Archie's final word. 3 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, I received a letter from Arthur Pembroke. He'd recovered fully from his ordeal and wanted to express his gratitude. The letter was formal, eloquent, and included a check for $5,000, a small token, he wrote, for saving my life and preserving my sanity. I showed it to Wolfe at 11 o'clock, after he'd descended from the plant rooms. He read it, grunted, and set it aside. "Deposit the check. Send Mr. Pembroke a brief note of acknowledgement. Nothing effusive. He saved you the trouble of an emotional meeting. You should appreciate that." "I do," hence the acknowledgement. The other victims had sent thank you notes as well. Dr. Ashford sent flowers, orchids, which Wolfe grudgingly admitted were of acceptable quality. Julian Casterbridge sent a case of excellent wine. Lydia Drummond sent a small abstract painting that now hung in the front room. Gregory Bannister sent nothing, but his law firm mentioned in passing that they'd be happy to handle any legal matters the brownstone might require, pro bono. The Meridian Society held a special meeting in early November to address the scandal. Maximilian Cordell resigned as executive director, taking responsibility for the security failures that had allowed Lattimore to target committee members. The board implemented new safety protocols, including mandatory security training for all members and a policy requiring that committee members travel in pairs for any society business. Adrienne Voss was elected the new chair of the Cultural Acquisitions Committee. She called to tell me personally, "I'm taking the job seriously," she said. "We're reviewing all our procedures, strengthening our vetting process, and being more careful about who we trust. No more fake applicants, no more security breaches." "Good. And if you notice any patterns, people disappearing, strange applications, anything unusual, you call us immediately." "I will. I promise." Lattimore's trial was scheduled for February. His lawyer was still pushing the insanity defense, but the prosecution had a mountain of evidence. The meticulously planned kidnappings, the modified van, the storage facility laboratory, the detailed records of each victim's expertise. It would be hard to argue that a man who planned something so carefully was legally insane. The manuscripts had been returned to Romania with much ceremony and many apologies from American officials. The monks at the Monastery of the Transfiguration accepted them gracefully, but announced they'd be implementing stricter lending policies in the future. As for me, I'd typed up the case notes, filed them away, and moved on to other matters. We had a new client, a wealthy widow who suspected her nephew of forging her late husband's will, and Wolfe was busy with the details. But sometimes, late at night, I'd think about those 6 people and how close they'd come to vanishing permanently. If Mrs. Hollenbeck hadn't noticed the pattern, if she hadn't had the resources to hire Wolfe, if Wolfe hadn't connected the manuscripts to the disappearances, if we'd been one day slower, one insight short, the city was full of people who could disappear. People without patterns, without connections, without someone to notice they were gone. Lattimore had targeted the wealthy and connected because their disappearances would eventually be noticed. But what about everyone else? I mentioned this to Wolfe one evening over dinner. He considered it while eating Fritz's duck confit. "You're contemplating the fragility of existence, Archie. A dangerous pastime." "Someone has to." "Not necessarily. People disappear every day. We can't save them all. But we saved 6. "Yes, and tomorrow, or next week, or next month. 6 more will need saving, and 6 after that. The work is endless. We do what we can, when we can, for those who ask. That's the limit of our capacity. Cheerful philosophy. Realistic philosophy. I prefer realism to idealism. Idealism leads to disappointment. And realism leads to beer, orchids, and well-prepared meals, all of which are considerably more pleasant than disappointment. He had a point. I finished my duck and let the philosophy go. Later that night, after Wolfe had retired to bed and Fritz had cleaned the kitchen, I sat in the office with the Dobermans. Caesar lay by the desk, Mars near the door, Apollo by the window, Minerva by the file cabinets, and Diana at my feet. The bulletproof windows reflected the room back at me, a secure space, protected and orderly. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Somewhere out there, people were disappearing and reappearing, vanishing and returning, living and dying in patterns we'd never see and stories we'd never know. But 6 people, 6 specific people were home tonight because Nero Wolfe had noticed a pattern, made connections and acted. 6 families had been spared permanent loss. 6 lives had been restored. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something is enough. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Diana following. The brownstone settled into sleep. Wolfe in his room, Fritz in his apartment on the top floor, the Doberman's rotating watch shifts through the night. The fortress held, the vanished had returned. And tomorrow, when the doorbell rang and a new client arrived with a new problem, we'd be ready. That's what we did. That's who we were. And that, as Wolfe would say, was sufficient.